If I asked you to point to your mind, where would you point? Behind your eyes? Inside your skull? Most of us would tap our heads without hesitation. After all, that's where the brain is. And we've been told our whole lives that the brain and the mind are the same thing. But what if I told you you'd be wrong? Here's why this matters. If the mind isn't where we think it is, then our entire understanding of consciousness might be incomplete. And when our map is wrong, we limit the territory we can explore. This isn't just a philosophical puzzle. It could be the reason so many of us feel disconnected from our true potential, locked in mental loops we can't break. Because if the mind turns out to be more than just brain activity, if it extends beyond our skull, then the possibilities for awareness, creativity, and even healing become far greater than we've been taught. Today, we're going to follow the trail, from science to spirituality, to find out where the mind actually resides. We'll question long-held assumptions, uncover strange evidence, and open the door to a far bigger picture of who and what we are. So, if your mind isn't in your head, where is it? Let's find out. When we start this investigation, the first step is to look at the belief most of us never question. The mind is just what the brain does. Modern neuroscience has done an incredible job mapping the brain's functions. We have fMRI scans lighting up in beautiful colors, showing which regions activate when we solve a puzzle, recall a memory, or feel an emotion. Billions of neurons fire electrical signals, passing messages through intricate networks. Cognitive science builds models explaining how perception, attention, and decision-making might arise from this neural choreography. It's a compelling picture. After all, damage to certain parts of the brain and specific abilities vanish. Change brain chemistry and moods shift. It's easy, almost automatic, to conclude the brain and the mind are one and the same. But here's where the cracks begin to show. First, correlation is not causation. Just because brain activity lines up with thought doesn't mean the brain is the sole origin of thought. Think of a television. What you see on the screen is perfectly correlated with the inner workings of the device. But that doesn't mean the broadcast signal originates inside the TV. It's receiving and translating something from beyond itself. Second, there are documented cases of people missing large portions of their brains, yet they live full, conscious lives. The famous example is a French man who, due to a condition called hydrocephalus, had only a thin sheet of brain tissue, yet he worked, raised a family, and scored within the normal range on intelligence tests. Third, intelligence and problem-solving aren't limited to creatures with brains like ours. Octopuses have distributed nerve clusters in their arms that operate semi-independently. Slime molds, single-celled organisms with no brain at all, can navigate mazes and find efficient paths to food. Even plants, as researchers like Stefano Mancuso have shown, can sense, remember, and adapt in ways that look remarkably like problem-solving. These examples force us to reconsider the brain-as-mind model. Yes, the brain is important, perhaps even necessary for certain human experiences, but it might not be the whole story. If the mind is only brain-bound, then consciousness should end wherever the brain ends. But what if it doesn't? What if the mind is more like a field, a process, or a network that extends into the body, and maybe even beyond it? This is where curiosity becomes unavoidable. Because if our map of the mind is wrong, we've been walking through reality blindfolded, mistaking the edges of the map for the edges of the territory. So if the mind isn't just brain activity, the next logical step is to figure out what it's not. By ruling out the wrong answers, we might start to see the outline of the truth. Philosophers call this the via negativa, the negative way. You strip away false assumptions until only the possible remains. So if the mind isn't only brain activity, what else can we rule out? First, the mind is not just the brain. We've already seen that the brain is essential for certain kinds of processing, but it doesn't explain the full range of conscious experience. Think of the brain as a hub, powerful, central, but not the entire network. It may coordinate, but that doesn't mean it contains everything the mind is. Second, the mind is not limited to the body. A curious thing happens when people use tools. The brain begins to treat the tool as part of the body. A blind person's cane, a surgeon's scalpel, even your smartphone, all become, in a sense, extensions of the mind. Studies show that when we use a tool long enough, our perception literally expands to include it. The boundary between me and not me blurs. And then there are phantom limbs. People who've lost a limb often continue to feel sensations in the space where it used to be: itching, warmth, movement. This tells us the sense of self and the mind that perceives it isn't entirely tied to physical matter. It can exist in a mapped, non-physical space. Third, the mind is not entirely physical at all. We live much of our lives in the imaginal realm, the world of thoughts, symbols, and dreams. These have no tangible form, yet they shape reality. A flag is just colored cloth until you give it meaning. That meaning exists nowhere in the physical fibers. A plan for the future, an idea for a book, a melody that hasn't yet been played. They all shape your actions before they ever touch the material world. This imaginal dimension is so natural to us that we often forget it doesn't exist in physical space. You can't dissect a dream to find its essence. You can't weigh an idea. Yet they can move nations, heal relationships, or, in the wrong hands, cause harm. Finally, the mind is not just a mechanical process. When we reduce it to nothing but electrical signals, we risk losing sight of something vital, our capacity for meaning. This is the danger of over-identifying the self with physical processes alone. We begin to see ourselves as nothing more than biological machines, forgetting that our subjective experience is what makes us human. By ruling out the idea that the mind is confined to the brain, the body, or the purely physical realm, we open a far bigger canvas. And that leads us to the next question. If it's not in your head and not contained by your body, then where does it exist? Or perhaps the better question is, what spaces does it move through? One way to see it is through the lens of three inseparable but distinct realms: the real, the unreal, and the transcendent. The real is the physical, measurable world, matter, energy, sensory data. This is where you feel the warmth of sunlight, hear the hum of traffic, and taste a sip of coffee. It's what your senses gather and your nervous system translates into experience. The real is the anchor point for the mind's interaction with the world. The unreal is not fake. It's the imaginal realm of symbols, stories, dreams, and ideas. It's where you replay a conversation in your head, imagine a future you, or feel a deep emotional reaction to a fictional character. The unreal is powerful because it shapes behavior in the real. A nation can be moved by a myth. A single belief can change the course of someone's life, even though beliefs have no physical form. The transcendent is the most elusive, the formless awareness that underlies both the real and the unreal. It's the silent witness of experience. You can sense it in moments of deep meditation, in awe beneath a night sky, or when time seems to dissolve during a creative flow. It's not an object you can point to. It's the field in which all experiences, real or unreal, arise. The mind operates as the interface between these realms. Think of it like a bridge, one foot planted in the real, the other in the unreal, and the entire bridge suspended in the transcendent. This interface isn't static, it's alive, constantly weaving physical sensations, imagined possibilities, and pure awareness into the tapestry we call reality. Take, for example, you're typing on a keyboard. The keyboard itself is real, a physical object under your fingers. The letters you see on the screen are unreal, mere symbols with meaning only because we agree on it. And your awareness of doing both, the silent knowing that you are here, typing, is transcendent. Understanding the mind this way changes the question from where is the mind to how is the mind operating right now. You can shift between realms, but you never leave the transcendent because it's the ground of all experience. By seeing the mind as moving fluidly between these three realms, we stop looking for it in a single location and start noticing how it emerges in the interplay between worlds. And that opens the door to an even deeper realization. The mind might not just move through realms, it might be distributed across the entire web of life itself. It could be something distributed, woven through our brain, body, environment, and even the relationships and systems we're part of. This idea, known in philosophy and cognitive science as the extended mind theory, suggests that thinking doesn't just happen inside us. It happens between us and the world. Think of how you solve a complex problem. You might jot notes on paper, rearrange them, or use a whiteboard. The thinking is not contained purely in your neurons, it's happening in interaction with the symbols and shapes in front of you. Your pen, your notes, and your working memory form a single cognitive system. Technology makes this even clearer. Your smartphone doesn't just store phone numbers, it stores part of your memory. When you navigate with GPS, you're outsourcing spatial awareness. In a very real sense, your mind now includes satellites orbiting Earth. But it goes beyond tools. The mind extends into relationships. Conversation is not just an exchange of information. It's a co-created space where new ideas emerge that neither person could have formed alone. Cultures themselves are like shared minds, holding values, languages, and collective memories across generations. This isn't only a modern insight. Many indigenous and mystical traditions have long understood that thought, perception, and spirit are not sealed inside individuals. They are embedded in the land, the seasons, the community, and the unseen forces that connect all things. When a hunter feels the presence of game before seeing it, or when elders sense shifts in weather without instruments, they're tuning into a mindscape that spans environment and organism. In this view, the brain is less like a storage unit and more like a node in a vast network. It's a local processor in a planetary, perhaps even cosmic, system of consciousness. Seeing the mind as distributed challenges the very notion of a personal, isolated self. It means that who you are and how you think is constantly shaped by the environment you inhabit, the people you interact with, and the tools you use. Change those, and you literally change your mind. It also invites a more ecological responsibility. If our minds extend into the world, then polluting our cultural, informational, or physical environments is also polluting the mind field we share. Likewise, tending to beauty, truth, and harmony in the spaces around us nourishes not only our own mind, but the minds of others. Once we understand the mind as distributed, we can also see that its location is not just out there in tools and environments. It's also between us, in the invisible web of shared meaning. And that takes us directly into the realm of language, the bridge where separate minds meet. Language is not just a tool for communication. It's a metaphor machine, constantly carrying meaning across the gap between one person's inner world and another's. Every word you speak is a kind of coded packet, shaped by your own associations and sent into someone else's mind, where it unfolds into a meaning unique to them. This process is more than intellectual. Words carry emotional tones, cultural histories, and even energetic impressions. The phrase, "I love you," lands differently depending on the voice, the relationship, the moment. In that sense, language doesn't just transfer information, it shapes states of consciousness. What's remarkable is that the location of meaning isn't in your head or mine. It arises in the shared field between us. A joke is only funny when the listener understands the reference. A poem lives only when it's felt by a reader. Meaning is co-created, not owned. This is why certain words or stories can ripple through entire cultures, altering collective perception. A new term can give people the ability to notice something they'd never seen before. Before the word gravity existed, the phenomenon still operated, but once named, it became part of a shared conceptual map. Beyond spoken language, we also exchange meaning silently. Think about how someone's presence can change the atmosphere of a room without them saying a word. Eye contact, body language, and subtle cues can communicate entire emotional narratives. This is mind-to-mind influence operating outside verbal form. In mystical traditions, this shared space is sometimes described as a field of resonance, a subtle layer where thoughts, feelings, and intentions intermingle. Modern science touches on similar territory with studies on social synchrony, showing how heart rates, breathing, and brainwave patterns can align during deep connection. Language also acts like a scaffolding for thought. The structure of our vocabulary shapes what we can easily perceive. Some indigenous languages, for example, have no fixed nouns for river. Instead, they describe it as flowing water being, embedding change and life into the concept itself. This isn't just poetry, it's a different cognitive lens, influencing how reality is experienced. When we recognize that the mind exists partly in this web of shared symbols and resonance, it changes how we approach both speaking and listening. We become aware that every word we choose is not just a sound in the air, it's a thread in the fabric of someone else's mind. And if language can reveal the mind's shared spaces, direct experience can show us something even more radical, that the mind may not have any fixed location at all. Language can point toward truth, but there's a limit to what words can do. To truly understand that the mind has no fixed location, you have to experience it directly. One way this happens is through meditation. When you sit quietly and observe thoughts as they arise, something profound becomes clear. You can't find the place where awareness begins. A thought appears and then fades. An emotion swells and then dissolves. But the space in which all of this happens, the knowing itself, has no borders. It's not inside your head, behind your eyes, or anywhere you can point to. This insight often deepens in flow states, moments when you're so immersed in what you're doing that the sense of me in here and world out there disappears. Time becomes fluid. The boundaries between self, action, and environment blur. Ask an artist mid-creation or an athlete in peak performance where their mind is, and they'll likely tell you it's everywhere and nowhere at once. Psychedelic experiences, contemplative prayer, and certain breathwork practices can open similar doorways. In these states, the mind feels less like a contained object and more like a process unfolding in an infinite field. The sense of location becomes irrelevant, replaced by a direct awareness of being. Here, a useful metaphor is the ocean and its waves. The transcendent is like the ocean, vast, formless, unbounded. The waves are the specific experiences, thoughts, and sensations we call the mind. But waves are never separate from the ocean. They're simply expressions of it. The mind is not a container floating in the ocean. It is the movement of the ocean itself. Experiencing mind beyond location can also happen unexpectedly. Standing on a mountaintop, gazing at a star-filled sky, or holding a newborn child can trigger a felt sense that you and the moment are not two separate things. In such instances, the question, "Where is my mind?" dissolves, because the answer is obvious. It is this entire experience. Importantly, these moments are not escapes from reality, but a fuller immersion into it. They show that mind is not a static thing trapped in a small compartment, but an ongoing relationship with all that is. And when you recognize this, you begin to see that changing your relationship with the present changes the very fabric of your mind. This understanding leads us to a final synthesis, a way of bringing everything we've explored together into a coherent picture of where the mind truly resides and how that knowledge can transform the way we live. So if your mind isn't in your head, where is it? We followed the trail from the default assumption, mind as brain activity, through the cracks in that model. We've seen that the mind is not confined to the skull, the body, or even the purely physical. Instead, it moves through three realms: the real, the unreal, and the transcendent, acting as an interface between them. We've explored how the mind functions as a distributed process, extending into our tools, our environments, our relationships, and the cultural web we share. Through language and meaning, we've seen how minds connect, shaping each other in the shared space between us. And we've discovered that in direct experience, through meditation, flow, awe, the mind reveals itself as a process without borders, unfolding in a vast field of awareness. The answer, then, is not a location, but a relationship. The mind is an emergent interface between the physical, the imaginal, and the formless, woven into self, others, and the world. This isn't just an interesting theory. It has practical consequences. If your mind is shaped by your environment, your relationships, and the symbols you interact with, then changing any of these changes your mind, literally. Curate what you surround yourself with. Choose conversations that nourish you. Engage with ideas, art, and spaces that expand your perspective. Because once you realize your mind is not locked inside your skull, reality stops feeling like a cage. It becomes a living, breathing playground, one you are co-creating every moment. And in that playground, every choice you make is not just shaping your life, it's shaping the mind you are.